Just, oh, there we go. We're live. Okay. Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm Relvin O'Shorty, and today we're going to look at Golden Rage, and we're going to be talking a little bit about like expectation and how it's delivered. Because this is a comic book that I was happy to get based on the concept alone, and the review is going to be like how well that concept was delivered on, if it's actually managed to deliver it in a way that's interesting. The concept is a bunch of old ladies in death fights beating each other to death, or serious injury at any rate. And I just like that concept. I like the idea of old women, quite often neglected from art and media, being given a chance to shine. Admittedly, this is just drawings, it's not real old women, but I still like the idea of it. Once and Future is doing it really effectively at the moment. So yeah, I was kind of on board with this, and the idea of them being on an island somewhere beating each other to death. I don't know. Something about it was like, yeah, this is going to be just cool. But then it's like, how do you actually make that into something which is a good story, which will last for quite some time? You do that by characterization and actually building a world and making the story make sense. Because at no point when I was getting ready to read it was like, I wonder why these little old ladies are on an island beating each other to death. I just went with it. And the comic book kind of accepts that's going to be a thing and puts in a character that is like our analog, our reader insert, as it were, who doesn't know what's going on either, to try and find out what's going on. And it's handled pretty well, because throughout the first issue, she is mostly in the dark, doesn't know what's going on. She is given very little information. It's mostly just a build-up of the characters and who these people are, how they interact with each other. And there's some quite nice moments done where we only really have one character who speaks a lot out loud, and then an awful lot of it is narration from our reader insert. But you still get a really good sense of who the other people are based on how they respond to this woman who talks a lot, either slightly mockingly or just ignoring her, or understanding that although she talks like she's a little bit dotty, shall we say, she still does know what's going on, and she's still a nice, kind, friendly person, so you want to be nice to her. All these things come across in just mannerisms and dialogue as well, and it's because this first issue is mostly a setup, it feels like a lot more effort was spent setting up the characters than the setting and the story. Because the big thing is, well, why are these people on this island? Why are they also struggling and engaging in death fights to try and control resources? Why are there different gangs? Why is one of the people considerably younger than all the rest? And a lot of this isn't answered. It's set up, left there just tantalizingly to make me come back. And I will go back to read. I'll carry on reading this one. I enjoyed it enough that I want to know what's going on. But the closest we get to an explanation is when we realize that the younger woman in her early 30s, I think it is there. And the older lady seemed very confused by it. When she announced that she had a very early menopause, the other woman go, oh, okay, that makes sense. You don't really get much more than that, other than you as a reader then going, oh, well, it's probably because there is some force or body of power which thinks that women are only have worth if they are able to procreate and breed a new generation. A terrible patriarchal way of looking at things, and absolutely ridiculous and outdated. But in this comic book world that we're dealing with now, that seems to be the way of things, at least as far as we can tell. And the story hopefully will get into why this reality has verged from the one ours. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really well handled. Plus, any chance to take a swipe at the patriarchy, I'm all in favour of that one. Probably the only thing about it which didn't quite live up to my expectations was the artwork. It's not to say it is terrible artwork. I think if it was, I'd probably just start with that. It's more that it's doing its basic job in ways that aren't really amazing. There's some like shots of the island, but you never really get a sense of what's going on. It doesn't really add to the sense of place. There's a couple of bits where some anatomy seems to be slightly at odds with what I expected, and some internal shots in a room where the perspective isn't quite right. Now, these could all be obvious choices made to add to the story in its own way, but for the most part, I just found myself feeling a little bit let down by it. Not to the point that it's going to turn me off and stop me reading it. It's basically just, it stops it being amazing artwork, and it just drops it down a few levels. So don't go into it expecting a visual feast. The colouring is pretty good. They actually do some quite nice stuff with washed out colors when it needs to be, and vibrant when it calls for it. That does add to the story and the setting in ways that are quite cool. There is also in the back a map of the island, which is, instead of just being like standard notations, it's done by one of the characters in the story, and again that adds to the sense of place really nicely. And then there's just a couple of pages on foraging nettles, including advice on legality and things to do with them and how to pick them. All this kind of back matter stuff I really, really like, and again, it just feels like it's adding to it. I like the synchronicity of when it all comes together. I think the artwork could be better, but other than that, highly, highly recommended. That's it for me today. I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.